So today we're here with Manaileng Maphikeis. You might not know why she's laughing. It's a long story. But Manaileng is a lawyer.
Yes.
And you've joined us here on Lab Live tonight to talk about law things. Is that what we call it? Law things? Lawsuits? What do we say?
We'll call it
law,
legal issues.
You see, you're talking to an artist. You already know. Every time I meet up with a lawyer, I'm always nervous. I can't sit still.
Don't worry.
I think I must ask, like, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to ask too many questions because I don't want you to expose how stupid I've been.
Oh, shame. No.
It's a lot of those insecurities, you know?
No, don't worry. If I was charging you per hour, you could be nervous. But since I'm not charging you, you can just relax.
How much are lawyers charging these days?
It depends. It depends. I mean, you know, you've got lawyers who are charging anything from 1,800 to at least 6,000 rand an hour. I mean, it also depends on your seniority. It depends on how long you've been doing, this whole law thing, But I mean, I think from an entertainment point and the fact that the industry, I mean, our own industry, so I want to call it infant in that everybody's only getting to the administrative side of it now. We kind of a bit more friendlier on the charging of the fees.
Yeah. Because every time everyone thinks about getting involved with legal, is that, see, I'm using it wrong now. Getting involved with legal, getting involved with law.
With lawyers. Getting involved with lawyers.
Getting involved with lawyers.
There's the legal issues, then there's the lawyers, or you can say attorneys.
Sorry, guys. What's going on? Huh? Sorry about that. We're going to have to edit that, and that was so smooth. or maybe we won't edit it, just so they know it's real.
What? It is what it is. Real time.
Every time people think about lawyers and the law, all they think about is expensive. So me being an artist, I've always been very selective when I speak to lawyers. I've always been very selective on when I engage a lawyer on a certain deal that I'm about to make or just generally any business dealings. I'm always very selective because the first thing that pops up in my mind is that I'm going to get charged a lot, right? That's from an artist perspective.
Yeah.
When you decided to become a lawyer, were you thinking, I'm going to charge these motherfuckers a lot? You
know what? If I was in the US, I would have been like, I am going to eat here. Yeah. But because of our country and our climate, and I know the fact that, having seen a lot of contracts and the kind of deals that artists enter into, the money's there, but it's not really there. Yeah. So you have to do other things for you to generate that additional income. Yeah. And for the most part, then artists would only, not be interested in hiring a lawyer because in your mind, you're just like, every single cent that I'm getting, I would want the cent to go into my pocket, or I'd rather reinvest it in studio time so I can record more material. I can do more things around the music and the creative side instead of even hiring an accountant because it's necessary. So the whole value chain is that you need a team around you. The same way you're paying a manager is the same way you should have a lawyer, is the same way you should have an accountant, is the same way you should have different aspects for your business because it's a business, you know? So for me, when I got into it, it started as a passion project because I knew a lot of artists, I knew a lot of entertainers. They needed legal advice, they needed help, and they didn't have people to go to. And the people that were there, are either all for the record label or for the brand. They're not for the artist. So it's just like, you know what? It's fine. Let's just do this. We'll do it as a passion project. We'll always keep the fees minimal. It's not going to be some exorbitant amount, So I knew what I was getting myself into. Yeah. Even now, as a core of my practice, it's tough because you kind of want to still charge, but you also understand who you're dealing with, especially with COVID. A lot of people are not out performing. Yeah. You're sitting at home, you're trying to make as much income as you can, but you can't make it to the full extent. So I also have to be mindful of that. So it's tricky.
But it's for the love.
It's for the love. I love music. I love art. I'm a bedroom DJ because I'm a music person. I just can't sing. I can't rap. So it's just like, you know what? Let me use what I've got. It's my legal knowledge and my passion for the law. and then integrate that with the musical aspect and the entertainment aspect.
Before we get into all those aspects, take us back into what made you decide to study law, or what made you say, I want to be a lawyer? Like, did it start off in high school, primary school, or were you in university and it just happened?
Way before that. So, a very interesting story. I think I was like in grade 2, and I always used to watch the news with my dad. So my parents and my family is very strict. So when we were young, the only things we really could watch were the news. So we weren't really watching TV the whole day. So you're either reading a book or you're watching the news. I'd sit there, watch the news with my dad or with my grandfather. And I saw these people wearing because before they used to wear the wig and the cloak. So I was just like, what are they? What do they do? That's what I want to do. So it's like in grade 2. So since grade 2, I've always known that this is what I want to do. So to a certain extent, I feel like it also clouded my judgment in exploring other areas of myself, because I was just one-track mind about law. So that's where it started. Grade 2, my dad encouraged it. I would go to court with him. He'd take me to court. We'd just sit in the gallery. And so now he's happy. I'm here. He had a lot of question marks. And I was like, entertainment. And he's just like, no, but here we are. So
which lane did he want you to go in?
I mean, obviously everybody always, for them, I think from older generations, they always saw the criminal side of it as making a lot of money, even though he also had his concerns about, you're female, the criminal space is a bit, dirty and dark, so he wanted more commercial. And I did a lot of commercial. I mean, my core, my starting years in law, literally commercial and litigation. That is what I was doing until around 2014, when I transitioned into entertainment, and now I do both. I marry the commercial part of it, because contracts are commercial transactions, irrespective of whether it's an entertainment, an IT contract, etc. They, that's what they are. So then I just merged the two, and I still do my commercial stuff, I still do my litigations, and I do the entertainment and the IP, the intellectual property side.
So it was always a vision that you had?
Always a vision I had. But, like I said, I think it was probably clouded. I would have probably done other things had I been less one-dimensional about it.
You're so lucky, because like my mom's an advocate. You see, that's the word that I always use for my mom.
Yeah.
Advocate. She, and she's basically always, every job she's worked, every position she's had as a legal counsel, and but growing up, I never had interest in trying to follow her footsteps. One, because I felt like she was so good at what she does, and the second one, I was just never exposed to actual practicing, and actually, I was never at her office, the same way that maybe your dad, took you around and showed you around. I was never sort of exposed to what she does, and in my later life, it's something that I regret, because it's law. No, let me think. Yeah, law is pretty much what I do right now. Like everything I have to do, I need to know what is going on with the law. Yep. And I can't run away from the law. With everything that I do, I can't run away from the law. And I wish that I spent more time, not to say I could have become a lawyer, but I wish I could have spent more time.
Maybe you could have.
Just being interested, because now I feel like it's late. Now I have to call you, or I have to find somebody to look at these contracts. And most times, to tell you the truth, we don't, because we believe we understand the language. So, Manae, I want to ask you, what is stopping artists from having lawyers on their contracts?
The idea that they don't have the money for it. And I always argue, and I've had a lot of arguments with artists around this, that you are willing to drop 5,000 Rand on a pair of sneakers, right? Some of them are sponsored, some of them are not. If you're willing to spend 5,000 Rand on a contract, on a pair of sneakers, at least spend 5,000 Rand on a contract review. Because ultimately, the difference between the value that you're getting from a pair of sneakers versus the value that you're getting from legal advice is that the legal advice will prevent you from having to spend even more trying to fight and litigate for your rights, because that's what ultimately happens. You sign a bad contract, now you're trying to get out of it. When you're trying to get out of a bad contract, it's going to cost you more, because now everybody has to do some fancy footwork. I have to be creative with my legal drafting, with the negotiation. We have to find all these loopholes. There's legal research. There's so much that goes into it. And even hiring a bigger team, which would entail perhaps an advocate should we want to fight it in the high court, for example. So ultimately, knowing that it's not, lawyers are human. Ultimately, I'm sitting in front of you. I'm a human being.
Yeah.
If you come to me and you say, look, Mane, I don't have 5,000 Rand for a review of a contract, but can we agree that I'll pay you 2,000 Rand today and we can negotiate. I've got a performance in a month or in 2 weeks. I will then pay you the balance in 2 weeks. That's a negotiation. That's what lawyers do. We negotiate. We agree. The difference is that you have to have the ultimate intention to pay me. And if you know that you're just not going to pay me for it, then, you're ruining it for everybody. Yeah. So it's a question of speaking to people. We're all humans. I mean, there's a lot of people who are having financial issues at the moment. You're going to your bank and having a discussion with your bank and saying, look, I can't pay you as much as I could or the full amount. Can we negotiate? And the banks are amenable to it because you're still getting something out of it. So the reason artists don't come to us is because automatically there's this preconceived notion that lawyers are just these tough people. We're not willing to negotiate. We're only willing to negotiate on your behalf, but we're not willing to negotiate our own rates. And we are willing to negotiate, and that's ultimately it. And another thing is that you can build a relationship with someone. If you know you're starting out, you don't have, the money for it, you can say to this person, look, I'm only starting out, I've got X amount of money, but can we build a lasting relationship? We enter into an agreement to say, for the next 5 years, the next 3 years, I'll use you as my lawyer for all my matters, and you charge me, a minimal amount versus charging me your full rate. Yeah. That's a relationship that you're building and you're growing together. So ultimately, when you're in a position to charge 500,000 per show, then at that point you've built the relationship with your lawyer. He knows what you're doing or she knows what you're doing. You've started from the onset. They understand you work, and you ultimately build up a lot more out of getting that relationship because you've negotiated.
So you never feel sorry for artists when you see them on their Twitter pages or on their Instagrams or wherever complaining about the record label won't let me free or this brand did this to me, or you never feel sorry for those type of situations?
Sympathy, zero. Like, it is literally zero, because I remember there was one particular, very popular artist. I'm not going to say which genre because then, it's so limiting in our country. One particular artist. No, because there's only so many. If I say there's one particular rapper, and a big rapper, you can almost count on your hands who are the really big rappers in our country. Yeah. So this one,
it wasn't me, right?
No, it wasn't you.
Okay, because I've been through my fair share too.
Yeah, so a particular artist, meet up with him somewhere. It was in the streets of Joburg, and I have a conversation. I'm like, this is what I do. This is when I was still starting out around 2015, 2016. It's like, this is what I do. This is my vision, my idea for it. And that person's like, yeah, but I'm not in trouble criminally, so I don't need a lawyer. And I was like, okay, yeah, peace. Yeah, me and you, our conversation is done.
I think that was the hint. I think that was the hint that she was talking about. So basically, you're trying to say that a couple years down the line, that person got in trouble.
I'm saying not criminally, but they're in trouble.
Okay.
Contractually, they're in trouble.
Okay,
and I was like, well,
let's not go any further. So basically, we need you.
You do,
and you need us too to do what you love.
Yeah,
you need artists to be able to come forward to you before shit hits the fan. Correct. You need people to try build relationships early. But for example, I've worked with artists that I want to send a legal document to, and they're always passing their legal document to the manager. And the manager deals with all their legal documents and signs off. And the manager might be telling them, it's okay, I got this. Is that something that you are constantly fighting, the information that the manager is giving an artist and the information that they should be getting directly from you?
Look,
because a lot of people trust, sorry to cut you off, but a lot of people put a lot of trust into their managers to deal with everything.
Yeah.
So how do you sort of try balance that relationship between people trusting their managers with everything they have and people also going to seek the second opinion?
Yeah. So my view is that someone who's going to manage your life and your career, you definitely need to trust them. So if you've got a manager that you trust, great, that's wonderful. But at the same time, you need to recognize that your manager is not an expert in a particular area. they might understand how going out there, getting you, the deal that you need to get in that, let me go and approach a certain record label, let's go sell you to these people. But they don't necessarily understand the legal stuff, because legal jargon is that, it's jargon. You might understand a word to mean one thing, but once it's interpreted, it means a totally different thing. So you understand, I'm trying to think of a basic word that everybody uses, and in legal terms, it means something totally different. I can't think at the top of my head. But with managers, there are managers who've been doing this.
Force majeure.
Force majeure.
What does force majeure mean?
It's an act of God. It's an act of God. Some people argue that COVID is an act of God. Some people don't. So it's just an act of God that something's happened that prevents parties from fulfilling their obligations. So like a hurricane and all of that,
So when can you enforce force majeure? Like what? It's only hurricanes can heavy rainfall be considered a force majeure? Is losing your laptop? If I have all my work on my laptop right now.
Yeah.
And the label is kicking my ass, asking me for an album, otherwise I won't get out the deal. And I lose this laptop. Yeah. This laptop burns and And your
iCloud didn't by any chance sync.
The iCloud is not syncing.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to say force majeure, guys? Let's call it.
Okay, so with force majeure, right? There's contractual that you can agree on what the terms of force majeure involve. Yeah. So with you in a entertainment space where you're creating music from your laptop, if you say my laptop is crashed, and it's crashed not because by your doing, you didn't pour water on it or you didn't throw it down because you intentionally didn't want to release the music, if you would then agree in that what a force majeure would amount to. Because you've got in IT, let's use an IT space, in an IT environment, there's certain things that would be require, which a force majeure would be more integral or more necessary versus in a normal, if I'm sitting and I just work in a normal office, what would amount to a force majeure might be different. For a mine, for example, an event of a force majeure on a mine might be a strike because the miners need to be underground. If the miners are not underground because they're on strike, they can't do their job. You can't deliver the tons that you said you deliver to a particular beneficiation company, so which then means you're not fulfilling your end of the deal because of a strike. But for something else, like if I say, okay, COVID, there's a force majeure, I can't do the work. If I can work from home and I'm sitting, which I'm doing at the moment, is working from home, can I really say it's a force majeure? Yeah, maybe someone might argue, but no.
I think what I'm trying to get to is like, how the hell are people meant to get out of these contracts? You know, because I'm a musician, right? And I've been through my fair share of fighting contracts and trying to get out of contracts. I've been blessed that I was able to, I guess, have a certain amount of clout that helped me in negotiations if ever I had a disagreement with somebody. But constantly you see these younger artists that don't have any sort of, I wouldn't say muscle, I would say negotiation muscle. They don't have anything to they have no way of getting out of a contract, amicably. What can they do? What can they do? I know that the first step is that they should have never gotten into the contracts that keep them stuck in there. But increasingly we're seeing these morally unfair contracts which are keeping people signed for 15 years, and owning everything that they do, and they don't get to earn money off of their work, and they get paid salaries. Isn't there something that you can do to intervene on those type of contracts, after the fact? And because a lot of people are complaining about those type of contracts that they're stuck in. How do they go about getting out? And I know getting on social media is not a good route. But how does the artist who does one album, everything goes well, and halfway through the maybe the second album's about to come out, they realize, I want to do this a different way, and the label is just saying no. Do you have to suck it up and finish the work? What can you do?
Look, you don't have to suck it up. I think there's always, if you're on top of all your administrative stuff and you're on top of what your relationship with the label is, there's always a way out, and that you can find an area where the label is failing you and you can use that as an exit. So, I mean, first and foremost, like you rightfully said, entering into a contract that's going to compromise you in the first place, that's the first issue. And ensuring that, and I always say, when you're entering into the contract, if we just take it a step back to the actual contract, when you're negotiating the contract and you want to sign a contract, important things to look at are the exit provisions, the termination clauses, and the duration of the contract. So a lot of the agreements that I've seen are always album commitment versus a duration, in that it's not a 5-year contract. It's a 5 album commitment deal. A 5 album commitment deal could mean you're sitting there for the next 20 years and you haven't fulfilled your 5 album
with
obligation.
An option for 6,
exactly,
and the option
correct.
is theirs, not yours.
Exactly. So what you need to do is, first and foremost at that point, is ensure that your exit provisions are there, how you can terminate. And a lot of the recording deals are one-sided. The record label can terminate, but there isn't a termination provision for you. So you can always go to court and argue the fact that, is this a fair contract? Is it fair? You can always argue the fact that I wasn't necessarily given an opportunity to go through the contract, because I know there are a lot of artists who would say that, well, they weren't given an opportunity. The record label said, you need to sign it now. If you don't sign it now, then we're moving on to the next person. Then, the argument is, oh, but I was desperate for it because they didn't give me an opportunity. You can try and argue that. But then there's also provisions in the contract that will say, you've signed it, and there's a clause that says, by signing this contract, you agree to all the terms and you warrant that you've read the terms and conditions. Yeah. So you've got all these different layers. So for me, the litigation part of it is the route that you would go. You'd have to look at the contract that you've entered into and try and identify an issue in it. And, it's always difficult to get out of a contract that's legally sound for the one party versus a fair contract. So you would have to fight with all your might and find a loophole of sort to get yourself out of it. And it obviously differs on a case-by-case basis. I mean, there's some contracts that are so horribly written that I've looked at where someone says, oh no, this is a licensing agreement, but when you look at it, it's actually a recording deal, and you can get out of it because you're saying, no, but you've said that this is a licensing, but all the terms, all the essentialia, all the naturalia, these are legal terms of the contract, actually speak to it being a recording deal. So actually what we've entered into is not a licensing agreement, because I want you to just distribute. This is what we're licensing for. We're distributing. I'm licensing you to have the right as the label to distribute on my behalf, not necessarily to sign me as an artist. Then you can look at those kind of issues and identify from that, and then fight and say, no, but this is what I wanted to sign, and this is the contract that I got. And you can get out of it like that.
But that's part of the fight.
What
we're trying to do is avoid the fight.
We're trying to avoid the fights, because the only way you can get out of any contract, if you can't negotiate, if you don't have that muscle that you speak of, and someone can't buy you out of the contract, you as an artist, you're one of the bigger, the bigger rappers. If you can buy, if someone says, a record label says, I want to buy Riky out of the contract, the other label might agree to it if the price is right. But if you don't have that muscle, then you're stuck in a marriage that you don't want to be in. I mean, even marriages you can get out of. So it's a contract that you enter into. So the same should apply with record deals that you enter into.
So basically, if an artist wants to start a career in music, first thing to do, have a lawyer that you can speak to before you enter into any paperwork or any type of deal or
Correct.
Any type of arrangement.
Correct. Even with your manager, because the thing is, across the whole value chain, there's an agreement that you're ultimately entering into. With your manager, if you've got a booking agent, with your booking agent, if you're doing it all on your own, then you have a contract with the distributors, then you've got a contract with, you want to add with the aggregators because you want to get your music onto Spotify and iTunes. There's all these contracts that you're ultimately negotiating throughout the value chain. So with everybody throughout the value chain, including your manager, I mean, I've seen some terrible contracts where managers actually own the artist's work or they own the artist's name. They've taken out trademarks under the artist's name, which means now you don't own your trademark, the manager owns it, and or has registered it. So you end up being in a compromising position even because of the agreement you enter into with your manager. So it's across the whole value chain. You have to ensure that whatever you're signing, whatever you're entering into, you understand it, you agree to it, and you can fulfill the obligations as well as the other party if they can do it. I mean, you look, if you're buying a house, if you're buying a car, if you're buying all these things, there's terms and conditions. Sometimes we don't all read them because we're happy to just get the car that we want and the bank is willing to give us the loan. But you still have to understand those terms and conditions and understand what it means. How do I get out of it? If I want an early termination, how do I get out of it? Okay, then I'm going to have to pay a penalty. What's the penalty fee? Okay, there's a settlement amount. What's a settlement amount? all these things. You have to know all these things. And I think it's important to think of, as an artist, to think of yourself as a business, because if you think of yourself as a business, you'll realize that there's different legs to it, which includes the legal, which includes the finance, which includes everything across the value chain.
Don't you think that people have been desensitized to contracts? Because, you know, the first, like, I was maybe 12 years old, or maybe 12 or 13 when I opened up my first email account. And there was this long terms and conditions that you have to go through. And you can see that this thing is 13, 14, 15, or how many ever pages. Now they're like 200 pages. But, you know, back then it was like a short agreement. But from that age, I was getting used to pressing agree.
Yeah.
Pressing agree. Not knowing that these are serious contracts that you're actually getting yourselves into. Yeah. So by the time you get approached by a brand that says they're going to give you 500,000 or maybe $1 million, or, you know, God forbid, 10 million bucks, you're not gonna waste any time signing that contract, because it's been that easy your whole life. Do we have a responsibility of teaching people more about signing their life away? You know, you walk into a building, they want to take your name and your ID number and get your signature, but they don't really explain to you what it's for. What all that is for. Are we desensitizing people to contracts?
I think we are. I think the fact that people don't even realize that if you're walking into a shopping center and you're walking into a shop and you're buying something over the counter, that it's a contract. You're entering into an agreement. If I'm going to buy this bottle of water and I take the bottle of water and I give you the money for it, that's an agreement. We've entered into an agreement that this bottle of water is exactly that. I'm buying the water, this is what I'm getting for it, and this is the value that you're getting for it, which is X amount of money. That's a contract. And you're correct when you say people are desensitized to it. And I'll tell you, even with lawyers, we're guilty of it as well. You accept those Instagram terms and conditions until one day you decide, you know what, actually, let me have a look at these terms and conditions. I mean, during the beginning of lockdown, I spent a bit of time looking at all these social media, terms and conditions. I was just like, girl, we signing, huh? We're just signing. We're just accepting. And when the TikTok thing happened with the issue around the fact that they're keeping information and they're distributing it for purposes outside of what they've purported to do, then you read the terms and conditions and you're like, oh, well, I mean, they kind of did say, it's vague enough for them to get away with saying, no, but we kind of did tell you, so it is, you're completely correct. We just agree to things and agree. And then because the consequences aren't necessarily dire for you at that particular point, you just think, there's nothing to it. But the minute it comes to owning your copyrights, owning your intellectual property, that's a very big and fundamental thing, because there's value in owning that property. There's a difference in buying the water, because the water, I'm just going to drink it and it's done and dusted, unless the water is off or it's not actually what they say it is, it's been laced with something else, then that's a different conversation that you're having. But with you as an artist, you read the contract, you have to understand it, because ultimately you might be signing your life away. You might be signing the name and the goodwill that you've built over a couple of years or a long period of time. And now all of a sudden you can't even go by the name of Riky Rick anymore, for example, because you signed it off to a label and the label says, well, sorry, we actually have the trademark to it. You can't do anything without us actually agreeing to you doing it. So it is important that, we educate people on the importance of contracts. I mean, even just legislation, the fact that there are all these regulations with COVID, it speaks to that. The fact that there's laws that are being enforced with the Disaster Management Act that have us in positions where we have to wear the masks, because it's a law. So the laws apply every single day with every single thing that we do. So it's one of those things that people should be mindful of, that everything that you do is regulated. When you're driving on the road, it's regulated. When you're getting your driver's license, it's regulated. When you're walking into a shopping center, it's regulated, because they've got their disclaimers, they've got their terms and conditions, and you walk in there and you're happy to walk in there without even knowing what you're walking into, what rights you're giving away to this particular center management, etc. So we have to be mindful of that.
I mean, you spoke about intellectual property there. Ownership is such a big part of being in the music business or entertainment business. That's where all the money is made. That's all the generational money is made. That's what people should focus on the most, is ownership. But so many people, I saw a story the other day on Carte Blanche, and it was sort of like it became like a bit of a trend because of the lockdown and everything like that. And artists started asking, where is my money? How do I get my money for the music that I've made? How do I get my money from Samro? You know, people started asking all these questions, but it's unfortunate that it takes a situation like you know, this pandemic that we're in for people to start asking those questions. And that's actually what you should be focused on, owning more than even your, you know, your gig money or anything like that. You should be really focused on owning your IP, no?
Exactly, because what it is that when you're entering the industry, you should realize the value stream, because you don't only earn money from recording, you know, the album and getting your split from the sales. There's so much more that you can earn money on. I mean, for example, a sync deal, to have your song on an ad, to have your song on a TV show, to have your song on a movie. If you own the IP to that particular song, you can negotiate deals. I mean, let's use Pharrell with the cell phone thingy service provider.
Yeah.
He made a lot of money, you know, from that song, because he had entered into that sync deal. It's an additional stream of income that didn't require him to do anything extra. He didn't have to perform it. He didn't have to re-record. He didn't have to do anything. They took what was already there and put it in the ad, and it's as simple as that. And he made money from it. So the value stream is very important. I mean, even from, you know, the collective management organizations, you mentioned the SAMROs. I mean, you've got your SAMROs, you've got your Capassos, you've got your SAMPRs, and all of these protect your different rights. I mean, SAMROs and Capasso, you know, support, you know, they protect the composer and the authors, etc., and the publishers. So they protect in that interest. If you're a composer and you've got the copyright to that music, you know that you're getting a royalty every single time your jingle plays on, you know, let's use the news, for example. Whoever composed the news, the jingle for the news, they're getting paid every single time that plays. And how many times a day is it playing? I mean, I always use even Generations, the legacy. If you think, or all of the Generations, if you think about it, it plays at 8 o'clock, and then there's a repeat, and then there's an omnibus, and then there's all these other usages of it. You're getting paid for it. I mean, you might not be getting paid per play, but ultimately when the distribution happens, you're getting a big chunk of that distribution because your music is played more than anybody else's, you know? So artists and entertainers need to know that the value doesn't just come from one thing. I mean, who would have thought a couple of years ago that there'd be an iTunes and everybody's listening to Apple Music and Spotify, and now that's a way of getting money, because that's a different, you know, stream of income for you. So you need to see it for what it is, and the fact that you can even have clothes that people are willing to pay money, and they see value in you having a brand that will sell clothes. Then we're gonna buy that into that brand. So you need to think of it wider than just being one-dimensional about it and saying, I'm going to record the album and I'm getting money from this and I'm getting the sign-on fee. Then the sign-on fee is recoupable, and then ultimately all the money that you're supposed to be getting, for example, from a distribution or from royalties, ends up going to the label, because wait, you still owe us money for the recoupment because you agreed to it. We said we'll pay you 100,000. You're happy for the 100,000. Now you realize actually the 100,000 wasn't enough, and then you end up taking loans, and then those loans are the security for the loans. Then becomes, okay, well then we need to then get your performance, whatever you're making from a gig, we want to get it. I mean, this is if you're not just entering into a 360, you know. So there's just so many issues and legs that artists need to consider about entering into the industry, and also knowing that you don't necessarily have to be in front of the mic for you to make the money. And I think that's also the biggest thing, is that most people think you have to be front facing for you to be where the money's at. And like I said to you, I mean, I remember there was one case in particular of a particular you know, composer who didn't even know that he had so much money that was sitting at these CMOs, and he ended up getting such a big payday because he composed music for, you know, for a jingle, you know. So yeah, so it's just there's this value, there's a different value streams, there's different ways of making money, and people must be mindful of it and know what contract they're signing so that they can exploit every single area of that of their music that they're creating.
Do you find that people are willing to sign away more than they should out of desperation, just because they're coming from, you know, an environment where they've never seen 50,000, 100,000, like you say, 100,000 to make an album? You know, you know, I'll give you a funny story. I don't know if I should be sharing this. Like, I'm in a licensing agreement with the label, and and I won't say the exact amounts, but every time they've put an advance amount in the contract, I've never accepted the advance. I've always they keep the advances. We've never asked for them to, you know, to fulfill the advance, and there's never been any issues. And I never have issues with them because they've always had the advance. But I look at that advance and I'm like, this advance is actually not enough to cover the making of this album. It's not enough to cover the thoughts that are in my brain.
Yeah.
It's not enough to cover the hours I put into making music. Not just, you know, not just the 200 or whatever 300 hours of recording it will probably be, but those years and years of experience. It's not enough. And I think a lot of people get into a situation where 50,000 rand is 50,000 rand is enough to cover their whole life's work, because that's what it is, you know.
It is, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I just needed some. Sorry. Moisturize break. Sorry about that. I was trying to signal.
This is an
I was trying
break.
to signal for him to.
I saw you're like strategic.
Yeah,
angles.
Because I realized, like, you know, when you're recording and you realize, oh, maybe my lips have been dry this whole show, and I don't know.
And nobody told you.
I don't know if you would tell me either. You seem like such a polite person. I don't know if you.
I'm very polite. I mean, I probably would have been like. If it was dry,
okay,
they weren't dry. They weren't dry.
Yeah, I kept licking my lips, and I don't want people to get the wrong idea. But you know, people get into that situation where 50,000 rand advance, 100,000 rand, even 150,000 rand, they feel like this is life changing. 200,000 rand, this is life changing. You know, and the longer I've been in the industry, I've realized $1 million is not enough for somebody to pay me to own me for the rest of my life, or to own my work for the rest of my life. So I always let people keep their advances, because I don't want to be working for someone my whole life. But it always brings me back to a situation where it's like, I wish at the beginning of my career, there was somebody like you to talk to that could help me set up my team that can not deal with like I'm just delegating it to them fully, but help me understand what is happening with my publishing, what's happening with my rights, what's happening with my image rights, you know, give me an understanding of how I should go about this, and how am I going to be able to stay independent and fund myself. Because most artists, once they start making money, they could really fund themselves through, but they've already jumped to sign that first contract, you know. And have you been in situations where an artist has come to you and you guys have sort of built a real independent company for them, or giving them a real independent structure where they're able to flourish and not be their own boss and understand what ownership actually means?
So there was, I mean, I'm not going to mention his name, but there was a particular, used to be an artist, used to be part of a group, but now has shifted and moved to more, you know, the back end side of the music. And we had, you know, started dealing with all of that, creating, you know, different, different almost independent labels for artists, but they would still use different channels for distribution and still have relationship with labels outside of them being signed. So they would be signed under their specific company. You know, they would have a company, sign under that company with a particular record label, but you're signing a different agreement. You're not signing on as an artist. You're signing on business to business, and you're saying this is what kind of arrangement that we're going to have. So we've done that. I mean, it's worked for two particular people. I don't want to mention names because I don't have consent to mention that.
No, they call that privilege.
Attorney-client privilege.
Attorney-client privilege.
Yeah, attorney-client privilege. So there's two that it's worked for. So that model worked. And I know he had Vision 2020, hopefully. I mean, we stopped working together, so hopefully he's actually seen it through. But, you know, so it's, I mean, for example, when you're talking about, you know, what's happening with my publishing, what's this, do you even need to publish? Do you need to have a publisher? Can you self-publish? Those are certain things that you can also look at. You're saying, I'm at the onset, I'm in the beginning of my career. Is it more worthwhile for me to split every single penny that I get with a publisher? Should I self-publish? Or, you know, look at those options. Maybe publishing, there's value in it because the publisher's got relationships, knows a lot of people. They can expose you to a wider array of people to buy your music for whatever purpose, be it an ad, be it for a movie, TV show, you know, TV games, etc. Or, I mean, I don't know if we call it TV games anymore. PlayStation.
I don't think so.
I mean, you know, I'm exposing my age, you know, you know, PlayStation, etc. And then you decide, okay, if I self-publish, how am I going to exploit my musical works? Do I have big enough audience, for me to sell it? Do I know how much to sell it for? So you have to think of all those things, and these are weighing. It's like an advantage, disadvantage. The same way when you're applying for a job, I mean, with anybody, and you have to weigh the advantages and disadvantages. And of course, all of us will look at the salary first. You're like, okay, tick. And then now you look at everything else. Does it meet what I wanted to meet? And like you said, people do enter into contracts out of desperation because you haven't seen 10,000 Rand. You've never held 10,000 Rand in your hands. So when someone comes in, it's almost like they're giving it to you because you don't understand that actually they're not giving it to you. You're going to have to pay it back some way, one way or the other. And you might not be able to pay it back, and which means then you're married to this person, you're tied to them for as long as you pay it back. And sometimes you never pay it back. So it's one of those things that, we've built models. I've worked with people. We've done some structuring. I mean, even from how, the splits would work, for example, between yourself, your publisher, and if there's an arranger, what the splits would be, if you're recording with a couple of people. And I mean, I always use this one story with one particular client who was always like, you lawyers, you just want to interrupt, we're busy, we just want to go record. I was like, don't just record, because there's a lot of fallouts that have happened because you guys are coming back, you've had a good time, you're lit, we're having Gumnandi, and you're like, okay, let's go record a song, everybody's hyped. You get into the studio, record, and now you're like, okay, who owns the song?
Yeah.
Who does it belong to? Then you enter into the beef, and you're like, okay, now we're fighting each other when we would have sorted out in the onset to say, guys, okay, because we're doing XYZ, this is my song, this is Ing, you are featuring on my song, great. You will still own your share of the copyright because you composed it. If you've composed it, we will report it. When we report it to a Samro, Capasso, etc., this is how we're reporting it, that the split is going to be, I own X amount as the composer, this person owns X amount as the publisher, and the other party as the arranger owns X amount. And, come to 100%, then you've notified Samro that this is the split that I'm supposed to get on this song. Yeah. So those are the kind of things that, I've helped artists do. I've helped them consider all of that information that's required, because there is a lot. And I think for the most part, there's so much that they would need to read and understand that is also not necessarily user-friendly. Because sometimes, the first time I saw certain agreements, I was just like, what? The first time I saw certain, distribution rules of, these collective management organization, I was like, okay, how's somebody that didn't study law supposed to understand this, especially since they're driven towards those particular people? Yeah. So that's why it's important to have people that understand.
Oh, man. Where can people get a hold of you if they need to get out of a devilish contract or get into an
amicable,
a wonderful, friendly relationship with somebody?
Whimsical and happy.
Where can people get a hold of you?
Okay. Well, you can send me an email. I've got, there's 2 email addresses I'll give to you. The one is manailengonlaw@gmail.com, and the other one is manailing@mahapa.co.za. So that's the law firm that I'm currently consulting with. So you can get me there. I'm on not Facebook. I don't have Facebook. I'm on Instagram and Twitter _Manaileng on both those platforms. So those are the platforms that you can reach out and let's chat.
This is. I think if anyone watched this, I'm hoping somebody watched this. If anybody watched this, definitely they would have gotten a lot of information out of you, and definitely a lot of understanding on how to go about contracts, how to go about getting into any business relationships. It's just not something that we hear a lot of. So I really appreciate you coming through to Lab Live today. We've been helped out to create this platform. And Arts and Culture came through and said, let's do something that's informative and that's going to help people. And I think this is exactly the type of conversation we're doing this for. It's to help people and get them the information. And it's amazing that they can hit up somebody like you who seems relatable. I know you're just down. No, you're just down. So you seem relatable right now, but I know when you put on your blazer, I don't know, that's what I'm saying, you might have to pull up with some of these meetings. I'll set you up with a couple of people. You might have to pull up with some jeans and a hoodie still.
Look, I'm a sneakers and hoodies and jeans girl. Ultimately that's the core of me. So I try, and I think where I am with the people that I work with, we always try. People always like, but why do you have your hair's colored? And I'm like, yes, my hair's colored. Yes, why must I not have color in my hair? Yeah. But you're a lawyer. Yeah, I'm a lawyer. lawyer, but I don't wear my law on my sleeve because outside of the law, I'm a person ultimately. So too. I'm a human. I've got my tattoos, I got my piercings, I've got my dyed hair because I'm human and it is what it is, you know. So I am relatable, and we definitely don't dress as formally and stuck up because the law's also evolving. People were young, we're vibrant. I mean, I'm young, but I'm not a youth, but I'm still young, you know. But you know, we're vibrant, and we also want to be relatable. And the fact that I'm in an industry that is also, you know, from the stream with entertainment, is that you're dealing with people who appreciate their hoodies and their jeans and being casual. So I'm not gonna always pitch there and, you know, look like I'm a principal at a school. And
thank you. With a Statterford suit.
I don't know about a Statterford suit. You know, no, not Statterford.
Have you seen those lawyers that pull up in those Jet shoes, the shoes from Jet with the buckle, and they act all serious, let's get busy, and the shirt from Ackermans.
Wow, I am not it. We get things tailored.
No offense to anybody out there.
Yeah.
Manae,
thank you so much.
Thank you for coming to Lab Life.
It's a pleasure.